Okay, y'all, I'm trying to get through this devotional without crying because literally since this morning I've just had a huge pit in my stomach, and I'd like to read to you an excerpt from Isaiah. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. We turned our backs on him and looked the other way. He was despised, and we did not care. Yet it was our weakness he carried, it was our sorrows that weighed him down. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his own sins, but he was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sins, and he was beaten so that we could be made whole. Now, y'all, whenever we hear he was beaten so we could be made whole, a lot of us think like, oh, it's just a couple punches. No, the Romans, they were master torturers. They had everything down to a T. And today I'm going to be reading to you in description of what the crucifixion was and what Jesus went through. And during this time, please just close your eyes and try to imagine what this was like and what Jesus was doing for you. Okay. From biblical and historical accounts, Jesus was stripped of his clothing and strapped to a block where he was beaten with a whip. But it wasn't just any whip. No, it was a 9-tailed whip that had metal shards, and each time that it would hit his body, it would go into his flesh, go through his muscle, and gouge it out. It was on his legs, his buttocks, it was everywhere. And because the Romans, they were master torturers, 40 times would have killed him, so they did it 39 times. And at any point, he could have told them to stop, used his glorious authority to bring down a legion of angels. But he continued. Why? So that we would have the opportunity to have a relationship with him. Now, after being flogged and having these open wounds all over his body, he then had a crown of thorns placed on his head. Now, it wasn't just a normal crown of thorns. No, it was like a helmet-like cap with 1 to 2 inch thorns. And whenever that was placed on his head, the thorns went into his scalp, and they took a reed and they bashed him in the head with it. They spit on him and humiliated him. You know, even after evaluating the shroud of Turin, they saw 50 distinct puncture wounds. So with blood running down his head and his scalp pierced, he still allowed them to continue. Why? It was for you. And he was beat so bad that they could not tell whether he was a man or a woman. His face was so disfigured, he seemed hardly human. And after that, he was forced to carry his own cross. But this wasn't just a sawed-down cross. It was rugged, with splinters all around, so the wounds he already did have all over his body, with the gouged-out flesh, was being punctured by splinters every time that he moved. He was so exhausted that he would fall down, and his open flesh would hit the ground with the crown of thorns gouging into his skull. And with the help of Simon, he had to walk to his death. He had to walk to Golgotha. Now, whenever he was put onto the cross with nails driven into his wrist and feet, heavy iron spikes that were around 5 to 7 inches long were gouged into his wrist and his feet. And whenever he was up there, hanging up on the cross, the weight of his hanging body would have pulled his shoulders out of socket and his arms reaching out 6 inches beyond their normal span of reach. And he was hung up on that cross, naked, disfigured, and humiliated, with blood running down his body. But he did not complain. He endured. He could breathe in, but to breathe out, he would have to manually lift up his back, with the shards of wood penetrating with each breath. So to say something, it would be so incredibly painful. And whenever the soldiers, whenever they were basically gambling for his clothes, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." Knowing the same people that were crucifying him, the same people who whipped him, the same people who mocked him, he was doing it for them too. Now from 12 to 3, Darkness went over the sky, and if you think the physical aspect was bad, the spiritual aspect was so far worse than we can ever imagine. Try and think of the worst sin that you've committed, something that you've held so deep down. Jesus took up all the sins that you have done, are doing, and will do within this lifetime. He took up the sins of the world. He was completely innocent, but he became sin. He cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? It was a profound moment of separation and anguish of bearing our sins, repeating Psalm 22. And at any moment, he could have said, stop, this is too much. But for the chance that you would come to him, he endured, out of relationship, out of the freedom that he knew that this would give you. He endured. And he bowed his head and released his spirit, and the veil was torn. I'm going to continue reading Isaiah 53 to you. All of us like sheep have strayed away. We have left God's good path to follow our own. Yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all. He was oppressed and treated harshly, yet he never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep is silent before the shearers, he did not open his mouth. Unjustly condemned, he was led away. No one cared that he died without descendants, and that his life was cut short in midstream. But he was struck down for the rebellion of my people. He had done no wrong, and had never deceived anyone. But he was buried like a criminal. He was put in a rich man's grave. In Revelation, it talks about worship in heaven. And the only one who is worthy to open up the seals was a lamb that looked like it had been slaughtered. So many of us can think, like, why do people always leave me? Why am I not enough? But you had a man who died for you. Thanks, y'all.